Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be learning how to do queries. Okay, so what is a query? A query is going to be a structure that we're going to be using to request something from the database. Now, what are we going to be requesting? We're going to be requesting to extract information on the database based on certain criteria. We're going to maybe request for the database to update, add or remove any sort of record. So a query is going to be this structure that's going to request something from the database, and we're going to learn how to use it in how to define queries and access and how to use them. So again, I'm going to share my screen here, and I am going to open the SOSA Corp example. In the case of the SOSA Corp example, remember that we had the different tables: department, dependent, employee, employee project. We had also defined a form that we used to input data into the database. And I'm just going to open the employee table where we're going to have different information here. That this is the information that's already loaded into the database. So what I'm going to do right now is that we're going to create a query that is going to extract certain records from the employee table. And these records are going to be based on a certain criteria that we're going to define. So the query that I'm going to design right now is going to have to do with gender. I want to extract all of the records of the female employees in the database. And right now we've got two female employees, Jamel Ungson and Melissa Algraves. So let's see how we can do that. So we're going to go over here to create. We already know how to create tables and forms. Now we're going to go here where it says queries. And there's basically two ways to create a query. We can do it through the wizard, which is basically the wizard is going to guide us through the creation of the query. Or we can do it directly or more manually through the design view. I'm going to do it through the design view. So I'm going to click here, query design. And it's going to open this palette here. And it's going to ask me this query that I'm going to be designing, what tables is it going to interact with? Now, in this case, I'm sorry, it can be more than one table, by the way. You can add many tables that are going to be interacting this query. Right now, I'm just going to select the employee table, okay? And I'm going to add it. Again, I can add more tables if I want. And here are the fields that we have in the employee table, okay? So over here on the bottom, what we're going to have is the different fields from different tables. And there's certain information that we can define, like the sorting of these. We can indicate in the query if we want to show them or not. And the criteria that we're going to be using for selection. So what I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to grab all of the fields from the employee table. And I'm going to literally grab them. So I'm going to select them with the mouse and I'm going to drag them over here to the bottom. And what's going to happen is that automatically everything is going to be filled in here. By the way, I can do it that way, or I can just simply select here what I want. And I can add as many as I want. This was just a simple way of doing it, okay? So here are all the fields that we have in the table. All of them are marked as shown. That means that they're going to be shown to me when I execute the query. And here's the criteria for selection in this case. By the way, notice that this here is marked in gray. The type of query that I'm going to be doing right now is called a select query, because the only thing it's going to do is select records and extract them, okay? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go over here to gender, and the criteria that I'm going to use is that I want gender to be female. So the criteria is female, okay? And I want to extract all of this information from the employee table for this criteria, which is that employee gender is female. Okay. Now I'm going to save first and foremost. Remember that when I click save, it automatically asks me what the query name is going to be. This is something a bit, can sometimes be a bit confusing or problematic in Access. Notice that when we create a form, a query, a table, at that moment, it doesn't ask us the name. It usually asks us the name once we save it for the first time. So I'm going to call this query, I'm going to call it query, I'm going to employee gender female. And I'm going to click OK. So the query now has been created, and it's right here. Now let's see how the query works. So notice here that we've got the button that says run. So what the run button does is that the run button, and we can also we can click here the run button, and what the run button is going to do is that the run button is going to execute the query and give us, in this case, the selection that we're talking about. We can also do this through the data sheet view. So what I'm going to click here is I'm going to click run. And what's going to happen is that it's going to provide me the information as a result of the query. And notice that it's extracting the two records from the employee table. I'm going to open the original employee table. And the original employee table only has two records that are female, which is Yamel Lungson and Melissa Algraves. And these are reflected here in the query. So what the query did was extract from the employee table this information. Now notice that it's only extracting the information, okay? So the only thing it's doing is it's showing me that information. Now I can modify that information if I want, or I can present it in a report. I can do whatever I want with this new table. Now, just to show what happens here, I'm going to open the query again. By the way, right now when I open it, I'm in the data sheet view, which is the result of the query. I'm going to go to the design view. For example, if I don't want to show all of the information, I can remove some information. So I'm going to remove the supervisor, the manager. I am also going to remove, in this case, the address and the birth date. Okay, I'm going to save the query. And I'm going to execute the query again. Notice that now the information that is provided is only the one that I select. Okay, so this type of query, again, is called a select query, because the only thing it's doing is that it's extracting information from the table that I'm selecting, or the tables, meaning that I can get more tables here if I want it. Okay. So I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to do another query. Now I'm going to create a query also for the employee. Also for the employee table. I'm going to grab all of the, again, I'm going to grab everything and just bring it over here. Give me a second here. My mouse is sometimes not very cooperative. Let's select everything, bring it over here, the same as I did before. And what I'm going to do now is a different type of query. I'm going to call this an update query. Notice that when I change from select to update, some things change. So first off, an update query is going to be a query that only updates information into the original table. So notice that the original table is going to be modified. Okay, it's not just going to show information; it's going to modify information from the original table. Okay, there is a criteria also that we defined And the criteria is going to help us define what we are going to modify into what. So I'm going to do the following. The criteria, what I want to do right now is I want to extract the information from the employee table. I want to extract all of the female employees, okay? And I want to review their salaries. If this, and we're gonna give them a raise. We're gonna give all of the female employees a raise. Um, so what we're going to do is that we're going to extract the information from we're going to look for the information, I'm sorry, of the female employees, and we're going to look for we're going to review their salaries. If their salaries is less than 100, then their salary is going to be 100. We're going to change that. So the first thing we're going to do is that the criteria for selection, there's going to be two criteria in this case. The criteria is going to be that the gender is female and the salary is less than 100. Okay? If this occurs, meaning that the employee gender is female, I don't need to use the equal, and the salary is less than 100, I want to update salary to 100. Okay? Now, I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this employee female raise query. I'm not going to execute it yet. Before I execute it, let's look at the original employee table. So if you notice, in the case of the two female employees, Yamel Ungson, her salary says here that it's 75, and Melissa Algraves, it says it's 95. So in these two cases, what should happen after I execute the update query is that these two should be updated to 100. So I'm going to close this. I've got the query here, and I am going to run it. Notice that when I run an update query, it asks me, you are about to update 2 rows. This is important for update queries. Once you execute an update query, there's no undo. Okay, there's no control Z that makes you go back. Once you update records, they are updated permanently. You're directly modifying the table. So I'm going to click yes. Okay. Notice that it's not showing me anything right now because the update query should have modified the original table. So I'm going to open the employee table and notice that both of the records, in this case, Yamel and Melissa, now have gone to the 100. Okay. I'm going to do it again. Say that this is 75 or whatever, and this is 90. I'm going to execute it again, just so we see what happened there. Query, it's going to update 2 rows. Now, what I'm going to do is the following. I'm just going to modify one of them. I'm going to say that this one is 65. I'm going to close this. I'm going to execute it again, and notice that now it's going to tell me that it's just going to update 1 row. Okay, and click OK. And so now the only row that was updated was, in this case, Yamel. Okay, so this type of query is an update query. Notice that the icons are also different. This is a select query. This is an update query. Okay. Now I'm going to do another type of query, which is, I'm going to also do it for the employee table. I'm going to add everything again. But now I'm going to do a delete type of query. So we are going to, these are the fields, and we're going to delete based on a criteria. Okay, so I'm going to delete Dr. Chang. So the employee, remember that it's easier to do some searches or queries based on more concrete information than text information. So I'm going to be based on the employee social security number. The employee social security number for Dr. Chang is 1005. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is that first off, I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call this employee and I am going to say that the employee social security number is equal to 1005. Save it, and I am going to run. Notice that when I run it, it says that I'm about to delete one row from the specified table. So if I execute this query, then what should happen in the database is that that employee should be modified, which in this case is Dr. Chang. So if I click yes, let's open the employee table, then Dr. Chang has been eliminated. Okay, he's no longer in the table. Okay. Now, let's, so this is a type of query which is a delete query. Okay. Now, just going back to the database design, remember that we created forms, remember, and we created forms for the in this case the tables. But remember that when we create a form, let me delete this. No, I didn't want to create that. If I create queries, I can also create a form for the query. Okay. So I can actually, based on the information that's in the query, I can create a form that also, a form or a report for that query. And the next session, we are going to see how to create reports, okay? So this is basically an overview as to how to create queries, okay? Now, based upon this, let's look at lab exercise. So for lab exercise number 3, what you guys are going to be doing is the following. So for lab exercise number 3, again, we're going to be working with the um, PET example, which is the Hilltop PET something or whatever. So based upon what you did in lab exercises 1 and 2, you're going to create the following queries: customers who live in a certain state, pets of a certain type, and procedures for a certain pet type. This requires the pet procedure table to include a pet type if you don't have it already. And remember that to execute these queries, you need to have data. You need to have information data in your tables. Okay, so remember that when you turn it in, you need to have this information filled in. All of these, by the way, are select type of queries. Okay, that you're going to be doing for this lab exercise. Okay,